What if I told you that the missiles flying across the Middle East today, the tension around the Strait of Hormuz, and the shockwaves reaching cities like Dubai did not start in 2026? They started more than 70 years ago. A covert coup, a revolution, proxy wars, nuclear tensions, and decades of mistrust that slowly pushed two powerful nations toward direct confrontation. Today on the Indian Narrative, we break down how the United States and Iran went from allies to enemies, and finally to the brink of a regional war. Welcome back to the Indian Narrative, where we decode geopolitics, history, and the forces shaping our world. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. Right now, we are just a few subscribers away from hitting 100, and every single subscription helps this channel grow into a serious platform for geopolitical analysis. So if you enjoy deep, research-based content like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and join the journey. Now, let's begin the story. This story does not begin with missiles. It begins with oil. It begins with Cold War fears. It begins in 1953. During the early years of the Cold War, Iran held enormous strategic importance. Located between the Soviet Union and the oil-rich Persian Gulf, it became a crucial geopolitical buffer for the United States. In the 1950s and 60s, Iran and the United States were actually close allies. Through programs like Atoms for Peace, Washington provided economic assistance, technological support, and military aid to Iran under the rule of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Iran became one of America's most important partners in the Middle East. But beneath the surface of this partnership, something dangerous was quietly building. The 1953 coup, the first crack. In the early 1950s, Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh made a bold decision. He nationalized Iran's oil industry. For Britain, this was unacceptable. For the United States, it raised two major fears. First, losing Western influence over Iranian oil. Second, the possibility that instability in Iran could open the door for Soviet expansion. In 1953, the CIA and British intelligence supported a coup that removed Mossadegh and strengthened the Shah's authority. For Washington, this was Cold War strategy, but for many Iranians, it was seen as foreign interference in their democracy, and that wound would never fully heal. Part 2. The 1979 Revolution. Fast forward to 1979, and the situation exploded. Mass protests swept across Iran. The Shah was overthrown, and Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned from exile to establish the Islamic Republic of Iran. With this revolution, Iran's entire political identity changed. The United States, once a strategic ally, was now labeled the Great Satan. Tensions reached their peak during the 1979 hostage crisis. Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took American diplomats hostage. They were held for 444 days. For Americans, it was a national humiliation. For Iran's revolutionary government, it was a symbol of resistance against Western influence. By 1980, diplomatic relations between the two countries were completely cut. From that moment onward, the United States and Iran were no longer uneasy partners. They were ideological enemies. Part 3. The Era of Proxy Wars. Direct war between Iran and the United States would have been extremely dangerous, so instead both sides fought indirectly, through proxies. During the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, the United States tilted toward Iraq, which deepened Iranian mistrust. Over the years, Iran expanded its regional influence by supporting groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq, and later allies in Syria and Yemen. Meanwhile, the United States strengthened alliances with Israel and Gulf states to counter Iranian influence. The Middle East became a geopolitical chessboard, and every move only deepened the rivalry. Part 4. The Nuclear Flashpoint. By the 1990s and 2000s, the conflict entered a new phase. Iran's nuclear program became the central issue. The United States feared Iran was trying to develop nuclear weapons. Iran insisted the program was peaceful. Sanctions intensified. Iran's economy suffered severe pressure. For a brief moment, tensions eased in 2015 when the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, was signed. Iran limited uranium enrichment, sanctions were partially lifted, but the fragile agreement did not last. When the United States withdrew from the deal, trust collapsed once again. Sanctions returned, and Iran resumed advanced nuclear enrichment. The confrontation moved closer to the edge. Part 5. Escalation. The assassination of Iranian military commander Qasem Soleimani in 2020 marked another major turning point. Iran responded with missile strikes on U.S. bases. The shadow war between the two countries was no longer hidden. It was becoming increasingly visible. Then came 2025, the breaking point. Airstrikes targeted Iranian nuclear infrastructure. Iran viewed these attacks as a direct threat to its sovereignty and security. Missiles began flying across the region. What had once been a proxy confrontation was slowly transforming into direct military confrontation. Part 6. The Road to 2026. The tensions that erupted in 2026 had been building for months. Following the strikes in 2025, Iran's nuclear infrastructure suffered heavy damage, reigniting long-standing hostility between Tehran and the United States. At the same time, Iran faced severe internal unrest. Economic crisis, inflation, and currency collapse triggered protests across multiple Iranian cities. Meanwhile, the United States increased pressure, demanding a new nuclear agreement and warning Iran to halt uranium enrichment and missile development. Both sides began military signaling. American aircraft carriers, warships, and fighter jets moved into the Middle East. Iran conducted military drills in the Persian Gulf. The region was approaching a breaking point. And finally, on February 28, 2026, the line was crossed. The United States and Israel launched coordinated airstrikes on strategic locations inside Iran. These attacks targeted nuclear facilities, military infrastructure, and air defense systems. For Washington and Tel Aviv, the objective was clear: weaken Iran's strategic capabilities before they could grow further. But the response came quickly. Within hours, Iran launched waves of missile and drone attacks across the Middle East. What had once been a shadow conflict suddenly became a regional confrontation. Part 8. Dubai, the shockwave. Among the places that felt the shock was the United Arab Emirates, especially Dubai. For decades, Dubai had been seen as neutral ground, a global financial hub, a luxury tourism destination, a symbol of stability in an otherwise unstable region. But suddenly, missile interceptions and air defense activity lit up the skies over the Gulf. Dubai and the UAE found themselves caught in the middle of a conflict they had long tried to avoid. Flights were disrupted, airspace restrictions intensified, security alerts intensified, and global markets began reacting. Because Dubai is not just another city, it is a financial artery connecting continents, a logistics hub linking Europe and Asia. And when instability reaches Dubai, the entire world pays attention. Part 10. The Energy Crisis. As the conflict enters day 21, a new front has emerged, not on the battlefield, but in the global energy market. Iran is now focusing on critical oil infrastructure across the Middle East, and one of the major focal points is the refineries of Saudi Aramco, one of the world's largest crude oil producers and suppliers. This shift has sent shockwaves through global supply chains. The result? Oil prices have surged past $110 per barrel, and the world is beginning to feel the pressure. This is no longer just a regional conflict, it's an energy crisis in the making. At the center of it all lies one of the most critical choke points on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow stretch of water through which a significant portion of the world's oil flows every single day. Now, according to Iranian authorities, access through the strait has been restricted. Countries aligned with the United States and Israel are facing barriers, but others, those maintaining stable diplomatic ties, are still being allowed passage. And this is where India enters the picture. Through sustained diplomatic engagement led by Subramanyam Jaishankar and Narendra Modi, India has secured safe passage for its LPG shipments. Continuous communication with Iranian and Gulf leadership has ensured that India's energy lifeline remains intact, at least for now. Meanwhile, the Indian Navy has stepped in. Under Operation Sankalp, naval assets have been deployed in the Gulf of Oman, actively safeguarding Indian vessels and ensuring the security of vital maritime routes. Because in a conflict like this, control over energy is power, and right now, the world is watching who controls the flow. Conclusion. The conflict between Iran and the United States did not begin with missiles. It began with history, with mistrust, with political decisions made decades ago. From the 1953 coup to the 1979 revolution to proxy wars and nuclear disputes, each chapter slowly pushed these two nations closer to confrontation. And today, the world is witnessing the consequences. The real question now is not how this war started. The real question is how it will end. If you found this analysis helpful, make sure to subscribe to the Indian Narrative. Also, comment below and tell me, do you think this conflict will escalate further, or will diplomacy return before the region spirals deeper into war? Until next time, this is the Indian Narrative, and history always shapes the future.